Hey, it's Sandra Pike from Roll Page Atlantic and the Pike Group. We have a bit of a hot topic today. Well, actually, I'd like to think every time I, do these podcasts, we have a bit of a hot topic. Today is going to be about the rent to own. So I believe it was back in August, Trudeau came out and he allocated $200 million for affordable housing rent to own for 17,000 homes to be built across Canada. And I thought that I would get a mortgage broker in to talk about rent to own, the good things that are about it, and if there are some, pitfalls to it. But before we get to that, I will let this fine young gentleman introduce himself today.
Cyrus Habibi with Premiere Mortgage. I'm a mortgage broker here in Halifax.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, how long have you been doing mortgages now? I think I remember when you started back in the day.
About 6 years now, 5.5 years.
6 years? Wow. And you're just a rock star. You're killing it.
I appreciate it. Try it.
So I sent you the article about the rent to own, what the Canadian government came out with. And, what do you feel are the benefits to renting to own a home here?
Yeah, rent to own is an interesting program. So it has to be, obviously CMHC's got to be on board with it. The lender's got to be on board with it. The main, obviously, pro for rent to own would come down to saving up money for the down payment, which tends to be obviously an issue for a lot of people is having that amount of money saved up. So usually if you're paying a lot of money, $2,000 a month towards rent, and then, you're trying to allocate car payments, this and that, sometimes saving up the down payment can be the tricky part, right? So rent to own can fill that gap where you're still paying rent, but a portion of that rent would then go towards some of your down payment. But it has to be set up properly. And again, you got to get everybody on board with it. But it's a tricky one, but it could work if it's set up right.
So you don't need any money saved up at all. You can, if you qualify for the program, you can get this particular. You can get a house that's rent to own.
Well, the programs, from my understanding, and this is where they get tricky, is because we did a program about 5 years ago with a developer here where you have to put an initial deposit up front and then you pay, and then a certain amount of your monthly rent goes towards a down payment that's held in a trust with the lawyer's account or the account or the developer's accounting or whatever. Really, I guess it comes down to the developer and the setup on what do they want up front. Do they want $5,000 up front? Do they want $10,000 up front? There is usually a portion up front on these rent to own programs that the developer does want as kind of a deposit. And then they allocate from there a certain amount of money per month from the rent that you pay goes towards kind of like a savings account almost, right?
If I can't save up the money for a deposit and I obviously need to have good credit, do I need to be financially approved for, this program, even though I don't have a down payment? Like, is there any criteria that the bank is expecting or the builder is expecting, or maybe that you've experienced?
Yeah. Right now, this program, we don't really have any details on. They talk about how they might want to set it up, but it's one of those things where they haven't come out and said, how much of a deposit do we need down? Really, if you're getting yourself into a program like this, number one, the lenders really haven't communicated anything on this program in the sense that they would actually do it or not. So when we did this 5 years ago, the big issue we ran into was lenders and even CMHC actually getting on board with funding these rent to owns. And we even see it today where someone might have a rent to own agreement set up, but no bank or lender wants to fund it because it doesn't fit the criteria of your down payment or lending guidelines or whatever. So the most important thing is, okay, well, if CMHC is on board, are the lenders on board? And then you want to make sure that you're actually going to be able to get some kind of a financing approval when the time comes for you to buy this home in a year or 2 years or however long that agreement is. Because sometimes the way they might market it is to say, hey, your credit might not be the greatest or you don't have money saved up, rent to own, you can get a mortgage in a year and a half or 2 years. But the reality is if you haven't gone through the vetting process to understand if it's actually going to be attainable for you to get a mortgage in a year or two, you could just be throwing money out the window, right? So it's
wouldn't the owner of the property, wouldn't they want to vet who they have coming in?
Sure, but it wouldn't be really up to them. It would have to be a bank or a lender or a broker to do the vetting, right? Because they don't really understand, I guess, how a mortgage gets approved in a sense. Like a developer wouldn't know, right? They might say, yeah, you have good credit, but maybe the type of income that the person has doesn't work or doesn't get approved for the amount of mortgage that they need to buy this house out at the end, right?
So then what would happen?
You'd be out of your money. This is rent to own is very tricky because we see a lot of people come to us with rent to own agreements that have been set up between two individuals. And this person should have never got into a rent to own because they can't even qualify a mortgage today. And you can't really give somebody a mortgage approval for a year or 2 years down the road anyway, but at least you can look at it and say, hey, if you continue on this path, if your income is X amount, if you should be able to qualify. But there's really no approval to be put in place ahead of time. So it is a bit of a risk for sure if you can't buy it out.
So if the house today is worth, let's say $400,000 for easy math,
Mhm.
and and let's say in 2 years from now it's worth 450, do I have to get a mortgage based on 450, or would the mortgage be based on 400?
If the agreement was done based on a purchase price of 400, you would, I'm assuming you would kind of go off the 400 is what you would work that agreement off of. So it would be lower of the two.
Why would a seller, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with the program, and I think there's something for everybody. But if a seller developer gets into this type of agreement, why would I want to sell the house, 2 years from now, still only at 400 when I could have gotten, received an additional, $50,000, and I'm just making that up potentially.
Yeah, of course.
And then I don't know if that person can even afford the house.
Yeah.
In 2 years from now. So where are the benefits to a seller?
Yeah. And this is my issue with the program, is that it really, if you have a community built around rent to own, like if you're like, hey, we're going to allocate 50 new townhomes to a rent to own program, like kind of how we did in Governors Brook 5 years ago. Hey, this, you have rent to own program on the street for a year only, right?
Yeah.
And then you're buying it for X amount of money when the time's up, right? It really is a tough, like if you look at our market, I mean, what happened last year where houses that were X amount were so much more money in 6 to 12 months. If you're a builder, you're kind of like, well, that's not, I just lost X amount of money because I locked somebody in on a rent to own program. And then maybe honestly, you probably hope they can't buy it out because it's worth a lot more now, right? So the program is set up in a way where it's good if you're trying to be a buyer that needs a down payment, but really, I mean, as an investor or a developer, you're kind of holding on to inventory that you could probably offload sooner if you wanted to, right? For maybe more money. So I get it's a weird program.
But if you look at, I mean, with a buyer, so if my rent is $2,000, how much of that rent is allocated towards a deposit?
Depends on the developer and how they set it up. Like there is no guideline on this. This program is not even really a thing yet, right? It's kind of like hey, we're going to allocate this much money potentially to this program, which is 200 million or whatever it is. But there's no set guideline, right? There's no, okay, well, this amount of money of your rent goes towards the down payment. I guess it really at that point becomes developer to developer or builder to builder or whatever, right?
Yeah. But even at, if my rent is $2,000, I mean, carrying costs for that house for a builder or anybody would be more than $1,000 potentially.
Sure, just the insurance and the interest or whatever they're paying on that money, right?
The owner of the house, not the buyer, the owner would still have to, there still be taxes to be paid.
Of course.
There still is insurance to be paid, and plus they still have to pay the mortgage, like their mortgage, whatever they have on the house. So. Right. So if I need $20,000 for a $400,000 home, I mean, if the builder was able to allot $1,000, that's still 20 months. But it could be a 2-year or 3-year program for someone.
Sure. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky or I guess in terms of the program is, what are they doing with the 200 million? Are they using that money to subsidize some of the builders and some of the developers to say, hey, we're going to help you carry the cost of some of these homes for a 1 or 2 year program? And that's where the whole thing's a little bit.
It is pretty ambiguous.
Yeah, there's nothing really set in stone. Like the way that we had it done with the developer 5 years ago was half of the rent went towards a trust account that was held by the accounting firm of the builder, and they held the money. And then there was like a $5,000 deposit up front. And then there was a 12-month agreement that in the end of 12 months, you would essentially have enough money saved up for a 5% down payment, right?
Well, so something like that is good then.
That was good, but those were selling at $279,000, right? Which is like, and the rent was still like $1,800 a month. So then now you look at it and you say, okay, well, that same semi or detached home is probably now what, 400 or 500
or more,
and then or more. So then how much does the rent need to be in order for you to have a down payment saved up in 12 months? Or how much of a deposit do you need to give up front? Is it 10,000? Is it like one of the things in this article said they want a $20,000 deposit up front, right? Which is like a $20,000 up front.
If people could afford that, I'm sure they would go.
Most people would just buy it.
Yeah. So and that's interesting that you were I didn't realize you were involved in that program. So did anybody actually lose their deposit on that program that you were involved in?
Most of it ended up funding. I think a couple things where other people were walking away, or maybe they weren't vetted properly in the beginning, and this program, like in this article, it speaks about, some things about, if you have bad credit or if you're low income. It's like, those are not the people that should be applying for this program, because if you have bad credit, you're probably not going to fix it in a year, right? So you have to this program is designed for people who are probably have good income, good credit, and the only thing they're missing in the whole application process is a down payment. So some of those ones, I can't really remember if any of them didn't fund, but most of them did go through because people had so much kind of skin in the game at that point, right?
But I guess it would depend on, the price of the home, the down payment and whatnot, and maybe even who you're dealing with on the other side. But let's even go back and talk about, first time buyers or whatnot. Over the years, I've seen the credit union offer, no down payment for first time buyer. Wouldn't that be a better alternative? If you had good credit, you didn't have the money. Now, I don't know when the last time you did one of those types of mortgages, Cyrus, but from your recollection, can you tell me just a bit about maybe a program like that, why that would be more beneficial than what, Trudeau's government is coming out with?
For sure. And, these provincial programs are a lot better too. So the credit union, like zero down payment, it's really a loan that they give you, and then they give you some kind of a cash back, but the rates are a lot higher and this and that. So the provincial ones are actually a lot better. So like the Nova Scotia down payment assistance, they just like a month or two ago revamped the whole program, where before I think you were limited to like a $300,000 purchase and you had to make no more than 75 grand. Well, now you can't make more than 145,000 and the house price can't be more than 500,000. So that's a little bit more, okay, well, that makes sense. And then it's a 10-year interest-free loan. So that is where that money should be more allocated towards, right? If you really want to help people, it should be the people that are ready to buy, give them the down payment, do it interest-free over 5-10 years. Because a 10-year interest-free payment on 20 grand is not a lot of money a month, right? No. So most people can afford that. So, and then a lot of lenders and banks are with that program. So that is a much better use of that money than trying to do a rent to own program for somebody who's just going to be still paying rent for a year, or a developer that has to carry the costs for 12 months or whatever it is, right? Like this program the down payment assistance program is actually done really well. We just did one of those last week. Okay.
So the credit union here locally now has that available.
Well, credit union does their own zero down payment thing, but all the other banks and lenders, most of the banks and lenders just participate in the Nova Scotia zero down program, right? Like Scotiabank will do it. First National does it. I'm sure RBC, BMO, those guys do it. It's just a normal mortgage approval. And then the down payment just coming from Nova Scotia down payment assistance, right?
So and it's great. That is great.
Right? Way better than rent to own.
You know what? So I know that those programs are up and around. I don't work with a lot of buyers, unfortunately, but it is something that I feel that I know, like, for example, the credit union years ago, like they only had so much money allotted to a program. Is that the same right now? Like there'd be only so much money allotted, for a program for people to, get involved in?
Yeah, there is a, and I don't know what the dollar amount is, but I think they adjust the budget every year. So they get more money, like they would have gotten more money to then go and revamp the program to increase the purchase prices and do this. Because the reality is not everybody uses the program, right? And it's designed for people who don't have a down payment. And the argument is, well, they don't give you closing costs. But if you do rent to own and you got to put 5-10 grand down anyway, there's your closing costs, right? So the program really was almost non-existent for a year because it never caught up with the new house prices. Then when they revamped it, it's like, hey, this now works, and more people can take advantage of it because, why not? If you don't have the funds, but you have good credit and good income, right?
Yep.
Ready to go.
Be better, if the government looked at either closing cost or down payment, which do you think would be more
I think down payment.
more suitable? Oh, down payment.
I think down payment. Yeah, just because it's a bigger chunk of money. But I think if each province or each, area allocated a certain amount of funds to this program, it would help people a lot more in getting into homes, right? Because why rent for a year if you can just buy it today?
That makes so much sense.
Whether you're the buyer or the seller, right? Wouldn't you just prefer to have the deal done now?
As a seller or a corporation or the government, why would you want to hold product up?
Yeah.
When, when the money is here, and, even for a buyer, I mean, it just seems a lot safer to go. I mean, it might be a little bit more money, but it would seem safer to go, have my down payment paid through, as opposed to getting into something that there's so much uncertainty, and you already own the home. And then if you wanted to sell it in a few years, you're making instant equity more so than you would have, you know what I mean? Like, there's just so many benefits.
And the other big part of it too is, I mean, you've seen what's happened in the market the last 6 months with the interest rates, right? So let's say you signed a rent to own agreement a year ago, and it's time for you to now to take that ownership of that house.
That's right.
Well, you're not qualifying at 5.25% anymore. You're qualifying at 6.5% or 7%, whatever the rate is, plus 2%, right? Maybe now you don't qualify for that home because the rates have gone up. So you waited 12 months. You thought you're going to be able to buy the house. The rates have gone up. Now you can't buy that house. And now you're out all your money when you could have just bought it 12 months ago.
That's right.
They spin it sometimes with the whole bad credit thing. Well, you need 12 months to no credit's getting rebuilt in 12 months for you to get a CMHC mortgage. Like, that's not a 12-month fix, right? How
long is the fix then?
Depends on what the issues are, right? Like, if you have bad credit, it's not going to be fixed in 12 months, right? It's going to probably be a 24-month, 36-month kind of thing where maybe you need to show some history of you repaying your credit cards. Typically, CMHC wants to see a 2-year history of good credit, right? So it's not going to be fixed right away for you to then say, okay, I have bad credit today, but in 12 months, I'll be able to get a house, right?
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'm glad we had this chat today. Like, I knew things were revamped, but again, like, since it's just been crazy with, the market the way it is. And, I haven't heard much about that lately. I did hear about the rent to own article, and, the market here has shifted so much. But having said that, if your property is under 330 or 350,000, you're still getting activity. Like, I listed a property Thursday for 270. I had 11 offers this morning.
Yeah, for sure.
And
that price range is hot.
Oh, you're right. Now let's just step away, and this is a totally different topic. So what differences have you seen in your business, since, let's say, since July or August? Like, what's been different?
Volume or overall activity?
Yeah, volume would be great.
Yeah, I mean, volume prices have obviously been up this time last year, but the unit number is not where it was last year for sure. Kind of look at October and September as a pretty good gauge, because those tend to be, that and June tend to be kind of the busiest months. So you can kind of gauge based on last year where you are with units and what that looks like. And then you say, okay, well, like October last year was like 45 units closings, right? And most of those are purchases for me. So then I look at October this year, I'm like, okay, well, is that number going to be there? And it just comes down to one of those things where you got just one of those things where you look at it and you say, okay, well, obviously some people are scared because the interest rate's going up. Now some people don't qualify for what they used to qualify. So that plays a bit of a factor in the whole thing. So you got to kind of look at it and say, okay, well, what's the market? And some people are scared. Some sellers are holding out. Some buyers are holding out because they think prices will be different in 6 months from now. So you do still get a lot of that. But it's still, I mean, if you're going to buy a house to live in, it's no better time than now, right?
I agree with you.
What are you going to do? Pay rent, right? You're better off just still buying the house, even if, let's say, values go down slightly or whatever. If you hold that house long enough, you're still going to rebound, right? So you still need a place to live, right?
Everybody rebounded from 2012. You weren't in real estate then, but your mom was. And, that would have went, back then it was crazy. Mind you, we only had about 40,000 over asking compared to what we've had recently. No, it's a good time. And we are not the Toronto markets where our prices are totally inflated. I just believe that anything that you do purchase, hold on to it for at least 3 to 5 years, and
Yeah.
you shouldn't see a significant loss.
Yeah. The refinance business is, I don't want to say it's non-existent, but no one's doing refinance. Like if you got a mortgage in the last 5 years, you're not looking to refinance definitely into a lower rate because it's not lower rates, right?
Yep.
So that side of the business is down or whatever. But yeah, just like you said, like our market here is so much different than Toronto and Vancouver, where we're just, I mean, they see fluctuations all the time. They saw fluctuations 5 years ago in 2017 when we didn't feel anything here, right? So it's just, we're a little bit more protected here. So, I mean, I think it still doesn't make sense to wait, right?
So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, sir, how would they do it?
Call or email. So that's probably
Okay.
the easiest way to call, text, email, all come to the same place. So.
And what's your phone number there? I'm going to get that up on the screen after for us.
Yep. 902-880-7048.
Awesome. Thank you so much for today.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.